Hello, this is Jeff Morgan. You are listening to an authorized audio version of the Age of Post-Scarcity, Volume 1. If this material is interesting to you and you'd like to continue, you're welcome to like the video and subscribe to the channel. You can also find my other books on Amazon Kindle, where I publish both fiction and nonfiction exploring similar themes. Thank you for listening.
Conclusion. The future is inevitable. Reiteration of the threshold. Humanity stands poised at a civilizational inflection point unlike any before it. The conditions that have governed life on Earth, scarcity, competition, survivalism, are beginning to dissolve under the weight of the technologies they once spawned. What lies before us is not merely a future defined by innovation, but a profound reordering of purpose, perception, and possibility. This transition echoes what Thomas Kuhn described as a paradigm shift, not a change within the prevailing system, but a transformation of the system itself, where the old rules no longer apply and the new ones have not yet been fully imagined. It is a moment defined by both creative power and existential ambiguity. Throughout history, periods of transformation have been accompanied by crises of meaning. As Hannah Arendt writes, the most radical revolutionary will become a conservative the day after the revolution, suggesting that without a guiding telos, change alone can become another form of inertia. Today, the collapse of scarcity-based systems invites not just a technological reckoning, but a moral one. We're not only surpassing material limitations, we are confronting the void left behind when those limitations no longer define us. It is in this void that questions of identity, value, and destiny intensify. As Viktor Frankl emphasized, in the absence of suffering, human beings do not automatically become free. They must rediscover meaning or risk falling into what he termed an existential vacuum, a condition marked by despair in the face of unlimited possibility. This moment is shaped by a confluence of forces: artificial intelligence evolving into superintelligence, quantum fields revealing the possibility of limitless energy, and interstellar travel emerging from the realm of theory into feasibility. But tools alone cannot anchor a civilization. As Eric Fromm argues in The Anatomy of Human Destructiveness, the failure of modern civilization is not due to a lack of knowledge or technology, but to a deficiency in emotional and spiritual development. The capacity to overcome scarcity must be matched by the capacity to reimagine our ethics, institutions, and relationships. The challenge, then, is not whether we can master the tools of abundance, but whether we can master ourselves in their presence. For centuries, power has been measured in control over land, resources, populations. Now, the emergence of post-scarcity conditions compels a redefinition of power as coherence, compassion, and creative responsibility. Aldous Huxley envisioned such a transformation in Ireland, where the central question was not what people could do, but who they could become if freed from fear and want. Huxley's ideal was not technological dominance, but self-knowledge, self-control, and a growing awareness of our shared being. This perspective challenges us to see the end of scarcity not as the culmination of progress, but as the beginning of an entirely new developmental arc, one that may require more courage, humility, and imagination than any epoch before it. At this threshold, we are invited to envision progress as something deeper than innovation. As Ivan Illich suggested, true development means returning power to people's hands, enabling them to create, decide, and live with dignity rather than dependence. Our tools must be convivial, not just powerful but relational, liberating rather than alienating. The transformation ahead is not just technological. It is civilizational, psychological, and perhaps even spiritual. And its success will depend not on how fast we move, but on how deeply we choose to evolve. The transformation is inner as well as outer. The technologies that now unfold before us, including artificial superintelligence, zero-point energy, matter replication, and others, promise not merely convenience or efficiency, but a total redefinition of the material basis of civilization. Yet the transformation they announce cannot be fulfilled through technical change alone. While external systems collapse and reconfigure, the deeper revolution must occur within the psyche and soul of humanity. It is not enough to escape the boundaries of scarcity if we remain bound by the mental and emotional architectures that scarcity has instilled. As Jean Gebser observed in The Ever-Present Origin, true cultural evolution demands not just new tools, but a shift in consciousness itself, a movement beyond mental structures into integrative awareness. The end of scarcity is meaningless unless it also initiates the emergence of a new mode of being. Material abundance creates its own kind of crisis, one that is unfamiliar and often more insidious than deprivation. When basic needs are automatically met, when work is no longer necessary for survival, and when information flows without barrier, individuals may experience not liberation but disorientation. As Viktor Frankl explained, human beings cannot live on bread alone. They require meaning, purpose, and the capacity to respond to suffering with dignity and vision. In a world of automated ease, the hunger for meaning does not vanish but intensifies. Without a corresponding deepening of inner life, abundance can become a void. In such a context, spiritual collapse may arrive precisely where material conditions are most favorable. This paradox was foreseen by thinkers who recognized that progress is not inherently synonymous with well-being. Eric Fromm wrote that modern humanity, liberated from necessity, is often more anxious, more isolated, and more prone to destructive behavior than its ancestors who faced real struggle. In Escape from Freedom, he argued that freedom itself can be terrifying when unaccompanied by a framework of meaning or community. The technologies of post-scarcity may remove the necessity of labor, yet they cannot answer the question of what life is for. That question becomes more urgent, not less, when struggle no longer structures existence. This interior dilemma is not only psychological, it is cultural and civilizational. The institutions we have inherited, including education, governance, religion, and even family, were shaped to manage scarcity. They taught obedience, efficiency, and endurance because those were the skills required to survive. But in a world where creation replaces consumption and where access displaces ownership, these institutions must be fundamentally reimagined. As bell hooks wrote in Teaching to Transgress, the purpose of education must move from conditioning to liberation, from transmitting information to cultivating wisdom and joy. In the post-scarcity era, learning must serve not the demands of the market, but the unfolding of the soul. This is why the transformation must be as much spiritual as it is technological. The question is not simply what tools we use, but what consciousness animates their use. As Simone, while expressed in gravity and grace, attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity, and it is only through attention that love, justice, and beauty emerge as social realities. The inner shift required now is one of attention, not to scarcity, but to possibility, not to fear, but to relationship. Only through such a shift can the new world be inhabited with dignity and coherence. Thus, while the external breakthroughs may be more visible and measurable, the more essential frontier lies within. The tools of post-scarcity demand a soul prepared to wield them. Without inner transformation, even the most miraculous technologies will only reinforce old hierarchies, anxieties, and dysfunctions. The challenge before us is not to become gods through machines, but to become fully human through awakening. As Ursula K. Le Guin once envisioned in The Dispossessed, a truly evolved society is not one that eliminates hardship, but one that redefines what it means to live together in freedom, mutuality, and care. That is the inner revolution, and it is already beginning. the moral and ethical imperative. The rise of post-scarcity technologies has exposed a fault line at the heart of modern civilization. Tools once imagined as liberators now confront us with an urgent ethical dilemma. The question is no longer whether we can eliminate material lack, but whether we are ethically prepared to live in a world where lack no longer governs human relations. The capacity to generate unlimited energy, replicate matter, and extend intelligence beyond biology has no intrinsic moral direction. As Nick Bostrom warns in Superintelligence, even beneficial intentions can unravel into catastrophic outcomes if not guided by ethical foresight and value alignment. Without a foundation of moral coherence, power ceases to be progress and becomes peril. Historically, moral frameworks evolved under conditions of constraint. Theologies of sacrifice, codes of justice, and even democratic principles were designed to regulate distribution, resolve conflict, and preserve communal survival. In an age of material sufficiency, those same structures may become obsolete or distorted. As Simone Weil argues in Gravity and Grace, moral clarity arises not from abundance, but from attention to necessity and suffering. When suffering is masked by comfort, the soul becomes disoriented and society becomes unmoored. In such a condition, freedom may morph into license and innovation into escapism. This is not a new danger, but it is newly intensified. As Eliezer Yudkowsky observes in AI and the Singularity, advanced intelligence systems will not save us from ourselves unless we first define who we are and what we care about in precise and operational terms. The tools we now build do not simply obey commands. They optimize goals, anticipate needs, and increasingly influence decisions. In the absence of a clear ethical foundation, they can replicate and amplify existing injustices or invent new forms of domination masked as progress. As from warned in The Anatomy of Human Destructiveness, civilization's greatest threat is not barbarism, but intelligence divorced from compassion and wisdom. To meet this challenge, we must move beyond reactive ethics and into generative moral design. The end of scarcity invites the formation of entirely new forms of social life, ones that do not rely on exclusion, extraction, or hierarchy. Yet such societies cannot emerge from technological breakthroughs alone. They require what Albert Borgman called in Technology and the Character of Contemporary Life a focal practice, a mode of being that centers values, not utilities, and affirms relationships over control. Post-scarcity societies must be rooted not only in abundance, but in deliberation, ritual, and reflection. They must recover the art of asking what is good before asking what is possible. Political institutions, too, will need to be reimagined. As scarcity wanes, so does the legitimacy of power structures that exist to manage it. Naomi Klein, in The Shock Doctrine, warned of how crises often lead to authoritarian consolidation under the guise of efficiency. In a post-scarcity world, where centralized power is no longer justified by scarcity management, new forms of participatory governance must emerge. These forms must be resilient to manipulation and rooted in transparency, cultural plurality, and ecological integration. Spiritual maturity is not a luxury in this transition. It is a necessity. The power to create must be matched by the discipline to care. Carl Jung suggested in The Undiscovered Self that in times of cultural upheaval, the individual bears a new burden of moral responsibility, one that cannot be delegated to institutions or automated systems. We now face such a time. The temptation will be to assume that abundance will solve our moral problems. But abundance is not an answer. It is a test, and the measure of our civilization will be how we choose to respond. Galactic belonging and the cosmic rite of passage. The unraveling of scarcity and the emergence of transformative technologies do not occur in a vacuum. They take place within a cosmos that is likely inhabited, intelligent, and ancient beyond our reckoning. To consider our trajectory without acknowledging this broader context is to misunderstand the scale of our current transformation. The post-scarcity condition, if realized, may be more than a civilizational upgrade. It may be a rite of passage into a wider galactic ecology of minds. As Carl Sagan reminded us in Cosmos, the cosmos is not indifferent to intelligence. It is the crucible from which intelligence arises and possibly the environment within which it must evolve cooperatively to survive. This possibility reframes the stakes of our moment. We are not simply confronting technological maturity, but facing an invitation to participate in a larger story of cosmic emergence. The idea that humanity may not be alone in the universe has long been dismissed as speculative fantasy. Yet, as Jacques Vallée argued in Passport to Magonia, the persistent and cross-cultural nature of non-human encounter phenomena suggests a deeper pattern, one that may hint at interaction with advanced intelligences operating according to logics we do not yet comprehend. These phenomena, whether interpreted through scientific, mythological, or visionary lenses, indicate that contact may not begin with empirical confirmation, but with symbolic resonance. The question is not whether we are being watched, but whether we are becoming intelligible to those who might already be watching. In this light, the evolution of consciousness becomes as crucial as the evolution of technology. As Jean Gebser articulated, a truly integrative society must move beyond the mental rational structure that dominates modernity and toward an integral consciousness capable of perceiving wholeness, time, and relationship in non-fragmented terms. Such a consciousness is not merely more intelligent, but more attuned. It perceives coherence where others see chaos and recognizes kinship where others see isolation. The galactic threshold may therefore not be a matter of distance, but of disposition. The challenge is not to reach the stars, but to resonate with them. Many thinkers have warned that power without ethical readiness leads not to evolution, but extinction. As Max Tegmark argues in Life 3.0, intelligence is not inherently benevolent. It must be aligned with compassionate values if it is to contribute to flourishing rather than domination. The civilizations that survive the transition to superintelligent systems may be those that evolve not by perfecting control, but by surrendering to relational harmony. What defines galactic belonging, then, maybe not technological achievement, but moral maturity. This reframing transforms our narrative from one of conquest to one of invitation. If other civilizations have reached post-scarcity states, their interest in Earth is likely not exploitative but observational. As David Deutsch posits in The Beginning of Infinity, advanced civilizations may view new intelligent species not as threats or inferiors, but as participants in a shared process of discovery, one that continually renews the frontiers of knowledge and purpose. Contact, in this view, is less about exchange and more about alignment. They may not be measuring our capacity to travel, but our capacity to care. This view also recasts our spiritual traditions in a new light. Myths of celestial visitors, ascension, and divine messengers may encode the memory or anticipation of such thresholds. As Joseph Campbell explored in The Power of Myth, the hero's journey is always about crossing into a larger reality, not through violence, but through transformation, and returning not to rule, but to serve. Humanity now finds itself in such a mythic moment. The transition from a world of survival to a world of stewardship is not only technical, but initiatory. It calls not for dominance, but for devotion. To approach the galactic community is to face our deepest questions of identity, intention, and integrity. Who are we when we're no longer defined by lack? What values will guide us when control is no longer necessary? What kind of beauty will we create when survival is assured? These questions are not distractions from progress. They're the essence of it. If we're being watched, it is not to measure our strength, but to witness our becoming. And if we are to belong among the stars, it will be because we have remembered how to belong to each other. A new definition of progress. The modern world has long defined progress in terms of speed, scale, and domination. To progress has meant to grow economies, expand empires, and increase the capacity to control nature and one another. But in a post-scarcity world, where accumulation is no longer a measure of success and competition no longer a necessity for survival, such definitions collapse under their own irrelevance. True progress must be redefined not as movement away from lack, but as movement toward meaning. As Abraham Maslow suggested in Toward a Psychology of Being, human development does not culminate in security or accomplishment alone, but in self. Transcendence, in the realization of values such as truth, beauty, and justice. A post-scarcity civilization must embrace progress not as a race, but as a refinement of the human spirit. This refinement calls for a cultural reorientation. The question is no longer how fast we can go, but whether we are moving in a direction worth traveling. As David Edgerton emphasizes in The Shock of the Old, the illusion of progress often masks the entrenchment of outdated paradigms and destructive habits. A society that can replicate matter and energy at will, but continues to deplete its ecosystems, fracture its communities, or marginalize its own people is not progressing. It is stalling under the inertia of unexamined assumptions. Progress, if it is to mean anything now, must signify a movement toward coherence between our technologies and our values, between our capacities and our responsibilities. To move in this direction requires that we embrace design not as a technical function, but as a moral and artistic endeavor. As Ursula K. Le Guin wrote in The Dispossessed, the act of building a new world begins with the courage to imagine one, and that imagination must be rooted in relational ethics rather than abstract ideals. The design of post-scarcity society will not emerge from algorithms or centralized blueprints. It must come from the ground up, through the lived experience of communities who rediscover joy, beauty, and cooperation as central civic practices. Progress is not about perfect systems, but about livable relationships. This redefinition also demands a new kind of storytelling. As Bell Hooks argued in Teaching to Transgress, transformation begins when individuals and communities reclaim the power to narrate their own realities, to speak truth in the face of dominant structures, and to dream beyond inherited limits. In the absence of scarcity, the dominant myth of progress as endless conquest must give way to stories of restoration, reciprocity, and depth. We must learn to measure growth not in numbers, but in nourishment, not in expansion, but in expression. The post-scarcity condition invites us to think like stewards rather than masters. The ethical arc of progress must bend not toward more control, but toward more care. As Albert Borgman observed in Technology and the Character of Contemporary Life, a good life is not defined by how many options we have, but by how deeply we engage with the practices and relationships that give life meaning. Progress must now mean the cultivation of those engagements, the recovery of presence, and the honoring of time not as a resource to be consumed, but as a mystery to be lived. To redefine progress is to reawaken our capacity for awe. Carl Sagan reminded us that science at its best is not a tool of control, but a form of reverence, a way of learning to live with humility in the vastness of the cosmos. That humility must now guide the future we imagine. The age of post-scarcity will not be measured by what we acquire, but by how we respond to the abundance that is arriving. Will we replicate the structures of domination, or will we discover a more luminous standard? That is the question that progress must now answer. Call to design, participate, and imagine. If post-scarcity is not merely an economic condition, but a civilizational rebirth, then it cannot be delivered from above or imposed through algorithms. It must be designed. It must be participated in. It must be imagined into being by those willing to re-inhabit the world as stewards, not as users. This moment, unprecedented in both its promise and peril, requires a shift in role for every individual. We are no longer only citizens of nations or workers in markets. We are becoming authors of the next epoch. As Ivan Illich insisted in Tools for Conviviality, the future belongs to those who reclaim agency through creation, not consumption, and who understand tools as extensions of shared values rather than systems of dependence. A world beyond scarcity cannot be built by default. It must be shaped by intention. That shaping begins with imagination. In a culture dominated by survival and efficiency, the capacity to imagine alternatives has been systematically suppressed. But as bell hooks reminds us in Teaching to Transgress, imagination is a form of resistance and liberation. It allows us to transcend inherited scripts and create new realities grounded in justice and joy. Without imagination, design becomes repetition. Without vision, participation becomes compliance. To enter the post-scarcity world requires not only tools, but dreams. And those dreams must be rooted in pluralistic, emancipatory narratives that give people permission to see and shape new possibilities. Design, in this context, is not reserved for architects or engineers. It is a sacred practice of world-making. As Albert Borgman wrote in Technology and the Character of Contemporary Life, meaningful life emerges when we center practices that deepen connection, invite reflection, and restore our sense of place within the world. The design of post-scarcity society will require the integration of beauty, ethics, and ecology into every dimension of culture, from housing to governance, from education to infrastructure. These are not technical puzzles. They are moral compositions. Participation is equally essential. The shift to post-scarcity will be turbulent, and no single authority or ideology will possess the answers. Communities will need to experiment, adapt, and collaborate across boundaries of identity, geography, and tradition. As Hannah Arendt observed in The Human Condition, political freedom is not the absence of constraint, but the presence of speech and action in public space, the ability to appear before others and engage in the shared work of world building. The era ahead will not reward obedience, but creativity. It will not depend on centralized control, but on distributed imagination. The invitation now is planetary. The responsibility is personal. It begins with choosing to see yourself not as a subject of transformation, but as its co-author. Progress is not a product. It is a process of ethical and aesthetic invention. As Eric Fromm wrote in The Anatomy of Human Destructiveness, the human capacity for creation and care is not guaranteed. It must be cultivated deliberately and expressed through structures that affirm life, not extinguish it. What we design now will echo across generations. What we imagine now will shape the moral atmosphere of the future. To design the post-scarcity world is to accept a challenge, both profound and poetic. It is to live as if the future depended not on what we fear, but on what we love. It is to participate in civilization as a living canvas, a shared act of becoming. And it is to imagine with care so that abundance does not become excess and freedom does not become indifference. This work is not abstract. It is already beginning in classrooms, communities, art, code, and ritual. The next world is waiting to be made. Let's make it together. Volume 2. The transformation begins. With the foundations of post-scarcity laid and the ethical terrain surveyed, the path ahead must now descend into the realities of transition. Volume 2 will not return a theory. It will enter the turbulence that follows disruption, the questions that emerge once the old order collapses and the new one begins to stir. This next volume explores what it means to live through the collapse of meaning systems, through the dissolution of economies based on control, and into a world that demands not only new technologies, but new selves. As Soren Kierkegaard wrote in his journals, true transformation is not a matter of adding to one's knowledge, but of changing the direction of the soul. That redirection cannot occur in abstraction. It must unfold in the lived experience of uncertainty, resistance, and redefinition. The chapters that follow will be arranged around three domains: collapse, renewal, and emergence. They will not describe a linear process, but a multidimensional unfolding, one in which cities reimagine their purpose, education sheds its industrial skin, and work is no longer a means of survival, but a field of play and creation. They will ask what becomes of law when enforcement is automated, what becomes of spirituality when mystery is no longer tied to lack, and what becomes of identity when competition gives way to presence. These are not simply institutional questions. They are ontological questions, and they cannot be answered from above. As Naomi Klein observed in The Shock Doctrine, transitions are always sites of vulnerability, but also of possibility, where the dominant narrative can be interrupted and rewritten. Volume 2 will explore not only the external structures, but the internal movements of a civilization in metamorphosis. Drawing from the insights of thinkers like Carl Jung and bell hooks, it will examine how individuals metabolize abundance, how communities reconstruct value, and how healing becomes a civic and cosmic imperative. As Jung noted in The Undiscovered Self, the collective is most dangerous when it ignores the depths of the individual, and most redemptive when it awakens them. This next volume takes that challenge seriously. It enters into questions of trauma, memory, ritual, and soul. It imagines not only new policies, but new myths. It will also move beyond the planetary. As our tools make the stars accessible, the next volume will ask what kind of mind and heart can travel with integrity. It will examine what alien contact implies not just for geopolitics, but for our story of existence. As Michio Kaku explains in The Future of Humanity, spacefaring civilizations must first master not propulsion, but planetary stewardship and cultural unity. The journey to the stars begins with learning to live with one another on Earth. The galactic is not an escape. It is an extension of our ethical maturity. This is the promise and demand of Volume 2. It is not a continuation, but a descent. Not into darkness, but into depth. The first volume has offered the map. The next will follow the territory as it unfolds. It will move through collapse, dream through chaos, and sketch the contours of a civilization that remembers itself not as a system of control, but as a field of consciousness in becoming. As Joseph Campbell wrote in The Power of Myth, the hero's journey always leads home, but the home that is returned to is never the one that was left behind. The world ahead will be unfamiliar, but it may also be more beautiful than we have yet dared to believe. Copyright 2025 Jeff Morgan, all rights reserved. No part of this publication may be reproduced, distributed, or transmitted in any form or by any means, including photocopying, recording, or other electronic or mechanical methods, without the prior written permission of the publisher, except in the case of brief quotations embodied in critical reviews and certain other non-commercial uses permitted by copyright law. This is a work of fiction. While every effort has been made to ensure the accuracy of information presented, the speculative nature of some concepts means they are based on emerging science, visionary frameworks, and theoretical projections. The author assumes no responsibility for actions taken based on this material.
This is an authorized audio recording of the Age of Post-Scarcity, Volume 1. If you'd like to continue, the next chapter will be posted here on this channel. My other books are available on Amazon Kindle. You're also welcome to subscribe to receive notifications when new chapters are released.